is the way in which something gets absorbed. That's how it gets purged. So something that gets absorbed through the medium of water, of liquids, gets kasha through liquids. Halacha Yudzayin. Keilim shenitzpashel b'misagdim mayim, vessels that got prohibited substances into the walls, absorbed into them through liquid, rated in water, or some other type of liquid substance. They're going kedera, like a pot. V'chein kaf, and so to a spoon, shedachafel l'techli, that someone inserted inside a vessel. Ha'imid alei on the fire, tafshel yisr, with a forbidden substance. Hachsharas ma'idei hagala. Kashering of that vessel would be done through hagala, through boiling liquid water in there. Just like the isser, the prohibited substance got absorbed through water. In the same mannerism, in the same way, the taste of isser would go out, would be purged. Now, before kashering a vessel with liquid, there are a few requisite steps that have to take place, required to make sure that the vessel is clean and doesn't have any rust. The reason is because if you have rust on a vessel, let's say this is the vessel I'm kashering and there's a buildup of rust inside, then the water will not be able to reach all areas. It'll be like a blockage. Before the hagala, one has to clean the vessel well. You have to remove any dirt or any rust that's stuck there. Because there could be some forbidden substance on the vessel, it's under the rust. But the hagala only takes out what's absorbed in the vessel, but does not actually take out what's stuck onto the vessel. But if you're kashering something with a very extreme heat, like 900 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, that's called libun gomor. There you don't have to clean the vessel first because the fire is so intense, it's going to burn everything up in its place. It's a different effect. When I'm kashering something with boiling water, I'm pulling out, I'm extracting taste. I have to make sure it's clean before I extract. But when I'm burning everything in its place, it burns it no matter what it is, because it's such an intense heat. If the actual rust has no actual residue, it's just discolorment. Are there others for it? No others for it?
There are.
Okay, whatever you want. Okay. Because garden, but in when you scrape against this color, you don't see any actual pieces. Then the rust is only color, it's discolorment. Then one does not have to remove it. In other words, stainless steel has a certain nice, shiny finish to it. If it looks a little brownish, but there's no actual residue there, it's okay, it's not a problem. Klisha piv tsar, a vessel that has a neck, meaning it has an opening that's very, very skinny. For example, has like a bottle has a very small top to it, right? And if there's rust inside, you can't get in unless you get in with a wire brush. But if you cannot effectively clean a vessel, one would not be able to actually do hagala on it because it's going to get in the way of that process. Another point which is important to stress and to mention is particularly relevant and prevalent with regards to commercial vessels. It's the norm in the industry when it comes to commercial vessels for there to be like a plate on the outside of the vessel. It's going to say, this is a vessel made by Grow-In or some other brand company that makes these types of vessels. So what happens is you have the actual tank, then you have another plate of metal that goes on top. And that introduces the possibility and the likelihood where you can have food residue stuck from where the plate meets onto the metal itself, which creates another thing that you have to be aware of. Anytime a vessel has a crack or a little indent, or if they engrave on the vessel itself, they write the company name and they engrave it. So again, you're leaving room for residue to build up. And the similar would be if you have indents and things like that, in the place where the handle touched the vessel. You have to clean it very well. If you're not able to clean them, then hagola would not help. Therefore, sakin sheyesh sedek, a knife that has a crack. So if you have a twist knife, I have a handle and I have the metal blade. So now again, I'm introducing the possibility that food residue will get stuck in the handle area because it's two pieces. And if one's not able to clean it well, then agola will not help. So what should you do in that case? So if the handle is removable, let's say there's a screw, you can remove the handle and soak it and clean it very well. Clean the blade and clean the handle. If it's not removable, you can't clean it and you can't kasher it. If it has a crack, if you have a crack in a vessel, a metal vessel, you can't clean, then you do have another option. You have to torch the area where there's a crack, because if I can't remove the food, I have to burn it. Make sure it's removed that way. Because then the fire experience would burn anything in its place, and therefore would remove whatever residue was built up in that crack, and then I could do the rest with hagolah. Okay, so it's understanding the mechanics of what's actually happening in this vessel. If all parts of the vessel are easily reachable and there's no cracks, then hagolah works no problem. If the vessel that was absorbed through boiling water, we can kasher with boiling water. But if there are cracks or there are areas I couldn't reach, then I have to make sure I remove whatever's inside the crack, either through removing it physically or burning it. Yeah.
So what if plastic was melted and now stuck with a pan or something?
You have to remove it because the area under the plastic has to get kasher. You'd have to remove that first.
And so if it's not removable,
Then you're stuck. I don't see any way around that.
could you blow?
You could. It's going to burn the plastic. So remove the plastic. You'll melt the plastic. You could. You'll melt the plastic, and then you get to the metal. That could work. Possibly. I mean, you're allowed to try that. I don't know if it's going to work, but you're allowed to try that. The next halacha gets into a ben yoimai. Word ben yoimai means the son of the day. What it means is it was used within the last 24 hours. The reason being is that a vessel that was used within the last 24 hours, when I boil water in it, I'm going to pull out a fresh taste. And I can make the vessel, let's say, forbidden again. Let's say, for example, I have a vessel that was not kosher. And if I boil, it was used for, let's say, to cook non-kosher chicken soup. And then I boiled water, and within 24 hours, I'm pulling out existing taste, which is forbidden taste. That's fresh taste. And it's going to make the vessel usher again. It's going to make the vessel forbidden again. So I've achieved nothing. So therefore, there's a principle when I'm kashering with boiling water, I also have to make sure the vessel was not used for forbidden substance within the last 24 hours. Is that clear?
Always.
Yes, when I'm kashering with fire, it's not a problem because it burns everything in its place. It's a different effect. It's not pulling out the forbidden substance. And it's not pulling it out, it's going to make it forbidden again. Burning it, different. But here, if I'm pulling it out, I have to make sure of that. Yes.
Oh, so only for hagolah.
Correct. So, mikivan shein hagolah mechalas tama iser. Since hagolah does not actually burn the taste of iser, ela mitziyati min hakli, rather it removes it from the vessel. Yishloch shemo la'achad sheyifli hakli esatama iser techamayim. We're concerned after one removes the taste of the iser from the vessel into the water, yachser v'yivlas tama iser min hamayim. Then the taste is going to go back into the water. Going to make the vessel usher again. The poskim therefore writes, one should not do hagal on a vessel that's a ben yomi that was used within the last 24 hours. What does it mean a ben yomi? Is special baby they were used for this very day. We have to make sure that from the time of the bishul of the iser, 24 hours have lapsed. But we make sure not to use this vessel for anything hot that's higher than Yatzei Ledes, which is higher than like 113 degrees Fahrenheit, because it's going to make the vessel usher again. But once the vessel was not used within the last 24 hours, so it's not a ben yoimai, meaning there's no taste that's in there that's fresh anymore because it's already a spoiled taste. It's after 24 hours. Halacha says after 24 hours the taste becomes a spoiled taste. Barnifkam Tama Isser, the Isser becomes pogum. The Chashem Nifla Hatama Pogum Bekli, when the taste that's pogum comes from the vessel, Shuv in Bekricha Latzav Lesasakli. It no longer has the potency to make the vessel asr again. Kimuvan. Behechsher Libon Mekivan Shnitzav Tama Isser, with regards to the Kashering of Libon, since the actual taste of Isser gets burnt, Yochel Lalaben Afir Kli Shuvin Yaimei, what is allowed to do libon even on a vessel that's a ben yoimai. Because again, since it burns the taste, you're allowed to do even a ben yoimai.
Ribbon is done with,
With fire, like a torch.
so what about those like small ones, not where it's all.
It's also, yeah, just a slower process, but the thing I do. Okay, halacha chaf aleph. How does the actual Agala process work? Page Kuf Abdallah, now 124. Acha sheniko es akli mikol davak, but you have to making sure the vessel is clean. Ben akli ben yem, the vessel was not used within 24 hours. Now the vessel is ready to go through the Agala process. Eich machshir b'Agala. How does the Agala process work? Memale kedeiras mayim. You fill up a pot of water. You put it on the fire. The yellow boys until the water boils, because they have the fire under that's making the water boil, and it's going to start to bubble. Then you put the vessel inside that pot. Let's say, for example, I'm using a kashering pot that's the size of half of this table. But the pot that I want to kasher within the kashering pot is a little bit big. I'm allowed to kasher more than half the pot at one time, and then the other more than half the other time. That way I'm making sure I'm getting the whole pot. In other words, meaning to say when it comes to Tevilas Keilim, to tabling a vessel, it has to be done a total immersion all at once. When it comes to the kashering process, I'm allowed to kasher a product, a vessel in parts, part by part, as long as I make sure I get the whole part. So if I do exactly half each time, I might have missed something. That's why you're supposed to insert, let's say 2/3 this way, flip it over and insert 2/3 that way. That way you know for sure that the entire vessel got a proper immersion. Is that clear?
Mhm.
If the vessel cannot go in all at once, that is, of course. One's allowed to do it in parts as long as you make sure that you did it right. No, I just want to share something with you. They make milk crates. So the official reason they make milk crates is to be able to transport milk. But they make milk crates for another reason also. It's just part of my humor, excuse me. But if you take a milk crate, let's say I have a very large pot. Let's say I have a brazier and I have boiling water in there, and I want to kasher silverware. You can kasher silverware using a basket also. You don't have to insert each piece of silverware one at a time. You can put it in a basket, a perforated basket. So I could take a milk crate. I can line up, let's say 10 or 20 knives sparsely laid out on the floor, and I can insert it into boiling water, and I can hold on to the milk crate so that way I can have a buffer between the hot water and my hands. That's allowed because, again, you're allowed to kasher more than one piece of equipment at one time, as long as they're not sitting too tightly together, where it's going to get in the way of the boiling water of touching each one. That's what he's talking about. You can insert the vessel into the boiling water through the medium of a basket. But don't put in too many vessels at one time. Because then the vessels will touch each other. Then the boiling water won't affect them. It won't be able to get there, right? It won't permeate them. Yes? You can also take a string. I can take, let's say this is my knife. I can take a string and I can loop a soft, like not a tight loop, a loose loop over here and here. I can dip it into the boiling water, because then it's going to get a total immersion. Be careful not to tighten the string on a tight loop. He said, because if I do it tight, is going to prevent the water from enveloping the area that's touching the actual vessel. Any questions on what I said so far? Okay, now the next halacha, again, these are things, everything has a system to it, and it all makes sense, it's logical. But it's important that we're aware of what's one and where. So not meaning to say, I'm hoping that through the course of our study, the spirit of the law is going to come through. We want to make sure that the vessel is going to get a proper Hagala experience. So for example, if I bring in a cold vessel, this is my cold vessel, I'm inserting it into a hot pot. By inserting a whole new piece of equipment into a hot pot, I'm going to cool down the water because I'm bringing in an ambient temperature vessel, right, into the water. So I have to leave it into the boiling pot, usually for 20 to 30 seconds to give it enough time so that the boiling water can rejuvenate itself and get hot again, right? Because it has to actually sit in there while it's boiling. We have to make sure that the water is going to be boiling the entire time during the Hagala process. Sometimes the water will cool down based on the types of vessels that you're putting inside it. We have to wait until the water starts to boil again. That's the first thing we have to be mindful of. Now, if I have a very large pot, I'm only putting in a little knife, of course, it's going to boil right away. But if I'm putting in more, but even after that, I'm supposed to leave the vessel into the boiling water for about 30 seconds. That's what he's saying in Halacha Chav Daled. After one inserted the vessel into the water, one should let the vessel that's boiling, that's being kashered in the boiling water, for about 30 seconds, in order there should be enough time for the water to go into the vessel of this the vessel to come out. But don't leave it in there for too long, because then it can be absorbed. Even though we said a vessel, it's not a ben yoimai, cannot become asur again. We're careful to leave it in. So we leave it in for about 30 seconds once it's boiling, and then we take it out. Sometimes, yeah.
What about when you, is Hagal also when you fill up the pot with hot water so that it goes?
Exactly what we're going to learn about now.
Oh.
You're on target here. Exactly what the next halacha is about. What happens if you have a large vessel and you cannot physically insert that in another vessel? It's too big. Let's say, for example, I have a big pot the size of my desk. I can't pick that up and put it into another vessel. It's too heavy or bad. So you can actually kasher it in and of itself. It's kind of similar to your question. What would I do? I'd fill it up to the brim and boil water in it. Now I need to achieve one more thing. I need to have the water spilling over the sides. There's a couple of ways to do that. First, I'm going to discuss it outside, then we'll learn about it inside. One way to do that would be, so if I have let's say, for example, the volume of my desk equals 500 gallons. Just for the sake of discussion. Okay, now, so I fill up 500 gallons and it's boiling, but still it's not spilling over the sides. I have to actually put more material inside the pot to make the water spill over, right? So one option would be I could take a stone and put that on the fire with tongs or with whatever, using tongs or some kind of a casing, and then let it get red hot, and then put the stone in the boiling water. That's going to keep the boiling water boiling. It's going to make it spill over the sides. Okay, so it's going to create more mass inside the body of the water, right? That's one option. That would make the entire vessel kosher because you have to also make the water splash over the sides. Another option would be you could take a paddle and insert it into the boiling pot of water, let it sit there for a minute so it gets boiling hot also. Okay. Like a paddle, like a metal spatula, big spatula. Make sure it's kosher. And then you can splash the water over the side so it's going to kosher it while it's boiling.
Oh, you just. move
You
it
can do
around.
that, yes. Also, one should be mindful, if it's a vessel that has a lid to it, the lid also has to get kosher. So if the lid is removable, you can remove the lid and dip it into the boiling water. If it's not removable, then it has to actually get boiling water on it also, even though it doesn't always get boiling water when it's cooking, but the splashing could get it. So how do we do that? So there's different types of lids. If it's a flat lid, it's very easy. You close it and the water's boiling, it's going to kosher itself. But if it's a dome lid, it's more complicated because there's that dome, the center area. So then if it's removable, you could dip it into the boiling water. If it's not removable, you could torch that area. You have to find some way to deal with that, or you could use a hot stone together with pouring boiling water over it, but it has to be koshered with boiling water as well.
But if it's glass, it can't be, right?
We learned about glass last week. There's a machlokus about glass. There are 3 opinions about glass. One opinion holds on the extreme spectrum, says you cannot kosher glass at all. On the other opposite extreme is that the glass doesn't even absorb, does not have to be kosher. Some Sephardim hold that way, by the way. They hold that glass does not absorb at all. And the Ashkenazim, we kind of take the middle approach that says we don't kosher glass from Chametz to Pesach, but for year-round usage, we do kosher glass. So that's the general answer to that question.
So I also wanted to know, when it splashes over, it just needs to like splash out, or it has to go like around the outside of the
On the
pot?
side, on the lip. It's a splash over. Doesn't have to, you don't have to kosher the whole outside. It has to just splash over the rim.
Over the rim.
Yeah. All over, yeah.
And
also, if there's a lip to the vessel, let's say it's a pouring, it has a lip coming out, that also has to get kosher.
is it possible to do it without those 2 methods, like just the water boils and it starts coming out?
You have to make sure all areas get proper boiling water. Another example would be if you have, let's say, a kettle that has a water line feed. Let's say I have a kettle that's boiling here, and then I have a water line that goes right here. So if I'm going to fill it with water, it's also getting absorbed because the heat. So that also has to get koshered by pouring boiling water over there. Just any area that's going to get that kind of heat has to make sure it gets koshered properly.
Okay. And if you do it with the metal spoon, that spoon doesn't matter. Like let's say you're koshering it for flame shaping.
Just it should be a spoon that's not a ben yoimite. That's if you're kashering for your own use. If you're kashering from chametz, the minig is to kasher the vessel before kashering with it. Okay, halacha chof. We're now going to do halacha chofei. Kli gadol sheyev shel achnis letich kli yachar, a very large vessel. It cannot physically fit into another vessel. So how do you do hagalos like this? Memali mayim al tzepasid. You fill it with water until the lip. Umartiche ala eish. You boil it on the fire achi yala buoys until it starts to bubble. Or when it's still bubbling, maniche letoiche evanei barzel. You put in hot metal or hot stone. Shenischamu habe beitaka, very hot with fire. Ki even nitzinenis tzamis amayim, because a cold stone is not going to achieve anything. It's going to cool down the water. Vaz yala resiches hamayim gamal sasatli. Then the boiling water will go on the lip of the vessel. Ki gam sasatli tzricha hechshed. As I just said, the lip of the vessel, the rim also has to get kosher. Halacha gets into the handle and the actual lid, which we also talked about, but we'll learn about it now inside. Din yodis hakli b'kisuy yitzorch lahagal gam es yodis hakli. You also have to do agola on the handle of the vessel. Ki gam yodis bola min ha'isur, because also the handle gets absorbed from the isur. Ardayim akshira de'iru mayim reischid. It's enough to pour boiling water over the handle mikli rishon from mikli rishon. Gam yodis ha'suya mi plastic. Also, if the handle is made from plastic, yochel la'agil de'iru. One can kasher through pouring boiling water. We already said that you have to clean well the indents and the grooves, the place where the handle is touched to the vessel. One has to also kasher the cover of the vessel. But irui will not help. Because again, the lid is getting boiling water touching it. So it needs boiling water to kasher it. It's interesting because there's a minhag that after kashering with boiling water, we do what's known as hagola b'mayim karim. We do a cold rinse because we want to wash off any of the kashering water that's still remaining on the vessel itself. Leihagim shemiyad achar hagolo. The minig is that right after the hagola, medichim es akli b'mayim tzoynim. We clean the vessel with cold water, kidei shelo yachzer v'yivla mimei hagola, in order that it should not reabsorb from the hagola water. Ach b'di'evet, after the fact, hagolose kisheda, af shelo yedichu. The hagola is still going to be kosher even though it was not rinsed. Shadei eine ben yoyme commission is burleo because it was not a ben yoyme. Any questions on what I said so far? Halacha Chavtes. Hagolas Keilim Pesach, kashering vessels for Pesach. If a person has the luxury of having dedicated vessels for Pesach, it's wonderful. It's praiseworthy. It's very nice. But technically, if it's a vessel that can get kashered, you can kasher also. Hamagal Kli Lachshir Pesach Yachal Agil Agam B'Teich Kli Chometz. One can use a chometz vessel that was not used within 24 hours. As the kashering vessel. The minig is the first kasher, the pot, what I said a moment ago. First kasher the pot, even though it wasn't used in 24 hours, and theoretically, if you did do it, it would still be kosher. But the minig is to kasher the pot first. If you did use let's say a Pesach pot for the Hagala process, and you want to use that pot again for Pesach, then we do have to kasher it as well. Or another option would be to have a vessel that's dedicated just for kashering vessels. Now I want to touch on another subject. It's a related subject, but it's a new concept. There are certain principles that we have that are designed for safeguarding purposes, not to lead to confusion. Imagine if we had a situation where we would kasher our vessels back and forth from dairy to meat status on a daily basis. It would create chaos in the kitchen. Someday the vessel is dairy, one day it's meat, Tuesday it's dairy. You forget where you're coming and going, and it's going to lead to a lot of kashrus problems. So there's a minhag not to randomly and casually kasher vessels from one status to another, unless there are certain circumstances in place. In other words, we don't just randomly do it. There has to be a rhyme and a reason. Let's look at it inside. Minhag b'nei Ashkenaz sheli l'shanis kli chalavi l'shimish basari. The minhag by the Ashkenazim is not to change the status of a vessel from dairy to meat status, or in the reverse, like they have to kasher. We're concerned you may have only one pot, and the agilena you're going to go kasher it from meat to dairy and from dairy to meat. We do that every day. One time you're going to come to make a mistake, you'll forget the yishtamish from you'll use it, thinking it's the right status, it's the wrong status, and you won't kasher it. There are circumstances where you're allowed to kasher a vessel, but what we're underscoring now is that we don't just flippantly and casually just kasher vessels because we want to just change our status. Okay, but there has to be a rhyme and a reason. And now he's going to list a bunch of valid reasons where one would be allowed to kasher the vessel. If I'm already kashering the vessel from chametz to Pesach, let's say the vessel right now is being used for dairy. Since I'm already allowed to kasher it for Pesach, I'm allowed to change its status from dairy to meat. Because the purpose of me kashering was not to change its status, but rather to make it kasher Pesach, right? So once I'm already doing that, I already have the gate door open, so to speak. I'm allowed to now change what I'm using it for. It was used for dairy until now. I'm now allowed to use it. I'm going to use it for meat now. The vessel became not kosher. I'm allowed to kasher it to whichever status I want. Someone gave you a vessel as a gift, and it was already used. And you want to change it from its original usage, you're also allowed to kasher it. For the whole year past, from when the vessel was used, you're allowed to kasher it and change it. You're allowed to kasher a vessel and to change its status from meat to parv, because here we're going from a much more of a gradual space, right? From meat to pot, we're not going from meat to dairy. So once I have it for pot, let's say for a few weeks, then I can make a soft landing into dairy. It's okay. This is all talking about if I'm kashering through the medium of hagola. I'm kashering with fire. And I'm allowed to change it in any way because fire, there's no concern. Once I fire something up, it becomes brand new and it becomes totally kosher. Right? So I'm not concerned that I'm going to turn on the grill. If I turn on the grill, I'm koshering it by turning it on. Therefore, the concern is not so acute. Halacha lamid. Hagolas kli besori, kli cholav yachad. Is it permissible to do hagola on a dairy vessel and meat vessel and koshering at the same time? Misha magal kli besori, kli cholav yachad. If I'm doing a hagola on a meat vessel and a dairy vessel, tzorach lizosh lepochis echad mehem lo yiyah ben yarmi. I have to make sure that at least one of them was not used within the last 24 hours. Shem shneim b'nei yoyman, because if they are both b'nei yoyman, yiyasur shneim, you're going to have a problem with bas v'chol, because you're going to have a taste of meat, a taste of milk going into the same water, which is going to create the prohibition of bas v'chol. You should make sure that every vessel of kashering should not be a ben yoyim, should not have been used within the last 24 hours. Halacha lamed aleph gets into a frying pan. There's different ways to cook food. A frying pan is interesting because it doesn't use too much liquid. It's mostly cooked through heat. So halacha lamed aleph machmash matagnin. So a frying pan that you're frying, you should look at dinim. There's difference of opinion. Does it need to have hagala? Is it enough just to boil water in it, or also needs liban? You should ask regarding kashering. Ulam machmash mishtam shabal leikol shemen. A pot that I use without any oil, like for example Teflon, ein lachshir, you shouldn't kasher it because you can't, because it's absorbed through fire and you can't kasher with fire. If it's a Teflon pot that's used for boiling water, I can boil water in it. But if it's a Teflon frying pan that only gets absorbed with fire, I cannot torch the inside of Teflon, it's going to get ruined. What about you have pots that have all these pretty designs and they come with these mosaics, pots that come with all kinds of ornate designs from the factory. You're not concerned that the color of the vessel is going to prevent the boiling water from getting into the vessel itself. One more halacha, and then we finish the subject matter. A vessel that needs to be kashered, we're not permitted to use it even on a temporary basis, even though it's only for cold. Let's say I have a non-kosher pot, and I want to use it I'm putting my apples inside there, or I'm putting crackers inside there, I'm putting bananas in it. It's not really proper. I'm just using it on a temporary basis, let's say for a few days, and I'm only using it for dry food, it's allowed. But it should not be used as a steady basis, because we're afraid you might come to forget. A knife that has to be kosher, and I want to use it on a temporary basis. One has to, besides koshering the knife, you have to make sure it's clean. And one method to make sure it's clean would be to stab it into untouched earth 10 times, or you can use steel wool and soap. Talking about getting the actual residue off the blade of the knife. There's two parts of a knife. There's what's absorbed in the metal, and there's the actual residue. We're talking about the residue now. That also has to be removed.
Sorry, what does the stabbing into the ground do?
The stabbing, what it does is it creates an abrasive force, that anything that's on the blade of the knife, not what's inside the walls, what's actually on the side of on the actual knife itself, will get rubbed off.
That's kind of cleaning.
It's cleaning. It's the same idea that you can do in the kitchen with steel wool. It's the same effect. But in the olden days, they didn't have steel wool, so what they would go in the back, they would just put it into the earth to harder it 10 times. You can do it today. Make a TikTok video. Jewish people go out at night, take their knives, the ground. It'd be a very crazy thing. Anyway, I'm just kidding. Some people think you can kasher any knife that becomes asur. I need to be kasher as moment to stabbing into the ground harder 10 times. That's not correct. He didn't sack and shovel, didn't call a kingdom. a knife has the din of any other vessel. If it got hot absorption, it has to be kosher the way it was used, either with fire or with hagal, with boiling water. The din of sticking the knife into the ground was already explained earlier. So that covers the subject we just discussed about kasher. Again, we have the like-for-like principle, and the way in which someone gets absorbed, that's how we are supposed to kasher it. Any questions?
Yeah, for the frying pan,
Yes.
you said it needs to be kosher with blood, right?
Yes, because a frying pan does not use any liquid, it's just really heat. Unless it's deep fried. Deep fried would be kosherable through liquid, but a regular frying pan would need to be kosher with fire. And if it's a Teflon frying pan, you can't kosher it because it won't survive the trip.
Right.
If it's a Teflon pot that's absorbed with boiling water, you could kosher it because it would survive the trip because you only need boiling water then.
Mm.
You have a general klal. You cannot kosher something that's not going to survive the trip. You can't even try. It's not worth it. It's not going to work. It's the month of Iyar, Ani Hashem Reisecha, I'm Hashem, your healer. It's a month of healing. It's beautiful weather. Coming out in the beautiful weather and walking itself and basking in Hashem's beautiful world, nature itself, the healing experience. I think I speak for humanity. I feel that way. It's wonderful. Yesterday I took a walk in the park with my wife, and it was just beautiful to get out again. But Hashem. So I'll tell a story about healing. There was a Yid that he was living in Russia, and he had a health issue. And he came to the Rebbe. I think it was the Rebbe Maharash. I'm not positive, but it was one of the Babche Rebbeim. And the Rebbe told him to move to Eretz Yisrael. I think he moved to Tzfas. Why? Because the person had an issue with their lung, and the Ramah, who's the halachic codifier, halachic authority for the Ashkenazi Jews, he paskined that if such an issue, person had such a condition with an animal, the animal would be unfit for consumption. It's not kosher to eat because it's a treifa. It's not going to live, and therefore you can't eat it. It's not a kosher animal, a treifa. But the Mechaber, who's the halacha codifier for the Sfardim, he held that such an animal is kosher, and the condition is curable, what treatable, etc. So the Rebbe told him to move Tzfas to Eretz Yisrael, where the Mechaber was the halachic authority, so that he should be able to spiritually benefit from the position of the Mechaber, and he had a refuah shalom. Have a good Shabbos.
It's so interesting.
The Bashba. Yeah.